Greetings, I'm Cindy Bensley-Gertz with Conscious Living Arts Yoga and the Vibrant Woman Awakening Program. Welcome to this Inspired Menopause series. This is video 2 of 3, and if you missed the first video, I shared the big why it's important to create an inspired and an empowered approach to your midlife journey and to menopause. So there could be a lot of different reasons that it's important, but there's two really important reasons that I see. The first is that you're creating the body and the being that will last you the rest of your life. So the average age of menopause is currently hovering between 50 and 52 years old. And for women, we can live to be 100 or nearly 100. So that's like a whole second life. So how strong and flexible and balanced and resilient do you want to be in body and being for the rest of that time? The second reason is a legacy. As you may have heard me say before, this is not our mother's menopause. So we don't have to subscribe any longer to the belief that the changes that are happening in our body and our hearts and our minds are all in our head, like our mothers and grandmothers were sometimes told, and they felt shamed. It may be that you've been told that you're too young to be in menopause. We can discard that belief too. Or maybe you've already been through menopause, or you've experienced an early and unexpected menopause for a medical reason, and you didn't have the chance to explore and process the feelings and the thoughts that you've had around the transition. So no matter what your situation, this is an opportunity for each and every one of us to create a new legacy, not to subscribe to the idea that when you go into menopause, you become old, you become frail and brittle and not useful anymore. Indeed, we are moving into our years of wisdom, and I want to help us create the scenario where we celebrate and honor that. So I hope you'll want to be part of that legacy too, because it's important. When women heal, families heal. And when families are healthier, communities are stronger and healthier. And when communities are healthy, our whole culture, our whole planet benefits and thrives. So I have 4 keys to that thriving, 4 keys to an inspired menopause, and one that can be happier, easier, and healthier too. So I want to share those with you today, but first I want to talk about change and loss. So change is not something that humans enjoy. It's very messy, and in fact, we often resist it. Even when whatever we're experiencing might be something that's not good for us or we don't like, we're used to what's comfortable and we don't like to change. Now, there are a lot of changes that are going to happen in the transition to menopause, which is known as perimenopause. So some of those are physical, and in fact, about 75% of women will experience some kind of physical discomforts. And those changes are happening because your ovaries are retiring while your adrenals, fat stores, and other organs are going to take over the production of your hormones. Now, there are other changes and shifts happening in your emotional being, your intellectual well-being, and mental health, and also in your spiritual life. Now, the brain is changing too, so some of those changes are because of menopause, and some of them are just coinciding with menopause because they're the big shifts that happen when we're in midlife. And no matter, it's a messy business, and your story might sound something like this if you're experiencing some of those physical changes. Let's start with hot flashes, which 75% of those women, most of them, experience. And for a lot of us, me included, that happens in the night. You feel the heat rising, starting from your toes or your loins, and it rises up through your body and your face to the crown of your head. And it's this fire that begins inside and moves outward. And you have no control over it other than to throw off the covers. And then you lay there for a couple minutes, and just as you're drifting off to sleep, you feel the chill set in. And then you wake up a little bit more, and your mind starts to race with your to-do list. And you begin to think about the things you forgot to put on your to-do list. And when you're awake enough, you realize, I drank a lot of water today because I'm losing all this fluid. And you need to get up and go to the bathroom. So this cycle can happen 3, 4, 5 times a night, maybe on the hour, and you might not get up to go to the bathroom every single time, but it's enough to disrupt your sleep. And so the next day, you're feeling a little bobble-headed, you might be cranky, you might be tearing up more easily than normal, or feeling anxious or even depressed. I don't know, can you relate to any of those? And eventually this sleep deprivation, if it goes unchecked, can lead to more serious thoughts that women have about finding relief in other ways, in harming themselves and ending it all. And I have heard this from a couple of my different women friends before. So that's all pretty drastic, and that's related to hot flashes. And you might not have those. You might be having, your story might include that you're having some changes in your menstrual cycle. You've had a normal cycle up until now, and all of a sudden it's maybe very heavy, and you're using multiple feminine products and afraid to leave the house. Or maybe it's more sporadic. It's not heavy, but your periods are scant, or you don't know when to expect them anymore because they're so unpredictable. You have one month, then you don't, then you have 3 in a row, then you don't have one again, and you can't count on that 28 or 31 day cycle that you used to have. You can't count on the 2 weeks of high energy and then the 2 weeks of lower energy where you wanted to turn more inward and rest more. And so that structure, that rhythm that we count on so much is gone. And so a sense of loss can accompany this, and maybe even some grief. And you may know of the 5 stages of loss and grief. They're anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. And you may not experience all of those stages, and you may not experience them in any particular order. But what I want to talk about in the coming weeks and an Inspired Menopause course is acceptance. And I want to be able to show you some tools and ways of finding acceptance. And that is one of the keys that I think leads to an inspired midlife and an inspired menopause, is accepting changes. So, you might be thinking, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this transition, or to process all this, or to go through all of the work of dealing with it. And if you can relate to that story, and you might not have menstrual changes right now, and you might not have hot flashes, there are many, many other physical changes you could be experiencing that I didn't name. And that's another thing that I go over in the course, are all of those different changes on a physical level, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual level. So you might hear yourself in that story, or you might not yet. But regardless, if you want to feel better, if you want to feel more ease, and you want to feel more energy, what is magically, if you're not creating the space and the time already, what is magically going to shift for that to happen? And so shifting perspective is the second key, and that shift comes with a change in perspective. So that's another one of the keys, as well as choosing feelings. And yes, we can choose how we want to show up. We do not have a lot of control over this unpredictable journey But the one thing we can do is choose our feelings. So that's a key. And awakening, excuse me. So awakening spiritually and intuitively. And those are the things that we're going to cover in Inspired Menopause. So your third video will be coming soon. And as I was getting ready for today, I read something in summing up that that made me realize that we can't let perfection paralyze us. This is definitely an imperfect journey, but when we take this journey together, it can be an easier one. And we may need to take imperfect but inspired action. So I'm inviting you now, in the meantime, between now and the next video, to take that next action, inspired and possibly imperfect, and that's okay, by connecting and commenting on this video. Or you can ask me a question too. So there's 3 different ways you can do that. You can reply to the email that this video came in if you received it that way, and that's Cindy@ConsciousLivingArts.com, and that's spelled Cindy is Cindi. Some people spell their name with a Y, mine's an I. At Conscious Living Arts is ConsciousLivingArts.com. You can also go to the comment section in YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube and send me a question or a reflection there. And I also post this video on my Conscious Living Arts Facebook page. So if you're viewing it that way, then head down to the comment section and leave me a note.